everybody, Al Bernstein here with another one of our boxing hangouts. And on tonight's show, we were supposed to visit with Shawn Porter, the IBF welterweight champion of the world. These things happen. We had some technical difficulties on his end where it couldn't be worked out. So Shawn is not with us this evening. We're going to endeavor to get him back in the next day or so. And, of course, we'll keep all of you posted on Twitter and Facebook and through all the other means we have of connecting with you, and we will do our best to get Shawn on. But the good part is we do have the other gentleman who was scheduled to be our guest this evening. We're going to talk to him in just a moment. First, I want to welcome in Dan Parks, the Hangout producer. And Dan, once in a while in life, you know, we have these insurmountable things that, you know, earthquakes, volcanoes, technical difficulties, you know, and so it ruins our plans, but that's okay. We'll get Shawn in the future.
Is all I can tell you.
That spoke volumes. That spoke volumes, but that's okay.
I just let everybody know this wasn't because of a lack of effort. We definitely put a lot of into this to make sure this works, and don't give up 100% yet. There are still some things that are trying to be handled behind the scenes, and don't be surprised if you see Shawn pop up here during this event. So we'll see if we can get lucky here.
There you go. And if that is true, that will be good. We will be surprised to see Kel Brook pop up because he's not scheduled. But if it's Shawn, we will. Anyway, we do have with us a gentleman who is going to join us in any case, and it'll be fun visiting with him. He is a young man who I've had the pleasure of working with for the last couple of years at the Boxing Channel. I know many of you see our Hangouts on the Boxing Channel and watch that channel. His name is Marcos Villegas. He's a terrific correspondent. Marcos, welcome to the Hangouts.
Hey Al, hey Dan, how's it going? And thank you guys for having me over here. I'm excited to talk boxing with you guys and just hang out.
Hence the name. Yeah, no, I'm really happy that we, you know, because this is a format in which, like, even you and I, when we interact on the Boxing Channel, even if we just recently did a Hot Topic show, which was a lot of fun, and that was a little longer form. But for the most part, we don't get a chance to just chat about boxing, where it's kind of a flowing conversation, and it's not in a shorter format. So this will be kind of fun. Now, you know, I thought we might start out by talking about the weekend in boxing, and I was present at the Jesus Chavez Brandon Rios fight here in Las Vegas, and you were watching on TV, and I'm wondering, for the folks watching on TV, they may have even gotten a better feel for it than I did. I mean, I was in row 5 or 6, so I wasn't exactly far away. But what was your sense of why Vic Draculich not only stopped the fight at that point, and for those people that don't know, Diego Chavez was disqualified in round 9 by referee Vic Draculich in a fight he was winning by 1 point on 2 of the scorecards. What was your sense of why he did it, and why did he disqualify Chavez?
You know, first off, I think we really lost a good fight because stylistically, those two guys they match up really well. Yeah. And I was thinking, like, wow, this fight's going to be really, really good. And then the first round happened, and I was like, wait a second, this is not going to be good. You know what? He lost control of the fight, and you know what? There's a lot of factors. You know, he took points from both guys, and I think, you know, he was kind of pressed against the wall, and he thought, like, he even knew, like, hey, I'm losing control of this fight. Chavez threw down Brandon, I forget in what round, like the 8th round or something, and you could sense that maybe he was thinking, like, okay, I'm really going to lose control of the fight if I don't do something. The moment in which he did it with Chavez, me personally, I didn't really agree because you could see on the replays that Chavez was just trying to get away from Brandon. Yeah. But in the context of overall the fight, he was fouling a lot. So, you know, Draculich was probably taking that into account. Okay, in the whole context of the fight, I've warned this guy so many times. I've taken 2 points away, and he hasn't stopped this behavior yet. And I feel that really attributed to it. But, you know, it was a bad fight to watch, you know, especially it was one that me personally I thought would be really, really good with all that happening.
Yeah, it looked like it was going to be a great matchup. I was really disappointed in Vic Draculich because a couple of things. Number one, over the course of that fight, my view was that it was a very rough fight, obviously. Yeah. Rios was using his head, which he was warned, I don't know, what, 4 times by Draculich?
Exactly.
No point was ever deducted for that. So if you take into account the fact that both men were fouling, both men were going outside the Marcus of Queensberry rules, I guess the part that I couldn't understand, and I asked the question at the press conference afterwards, was why then and why Chavez? I mean, Dan, you're nodding your head. You're mystified by it. I didn't get why that happened at that moment with a round and a half left of a fight that was clearly a very close fight.
It was very close, and there was several different opportunities where he could have taken points from Rios, and
Yes.
if he wouldn't have taken those 2 points away from Chavez, we would have had a completely different fight.
And I'm not suggesting Chavez didn't. He held a lot. I thought having a point deducted for holding at some point was appropriate for Chavez. The call that actually, ironically, the point he had deducted from Rios was for Chavez throwing Rios down. I actually thought that was a total makeup call. To me, that was just Vic Draculich thinking, okay, maybe I can use this opportunity to kind of even things out a little bit. And and Arum, the proof is in the pudding, because Bob Arum at the press conference, his final line was, he said, I want to tell Diego Chavez I'm sorry, and don't worry, you'll be back. As if to suggest, look, you kind of got a raw deal here. And I just think, I'm not suggesting, again, that he didn't foul, but so did Rios, and I think that the fight was just a rough and tumble fight. And refereeing, when fighters come from other countries, we always talk about the United States, how American fighters get a raw deal when they go elsewhere. But I'll tell you, it's a little bit of an epidemic. I have, in the last 15 years, seen so many foreign fighters come over to the United States and be faced with a referee that looks for all the world like he's, already thrown down against them. So
if jet lag isn't enough.
Yeah, right. That's the other thing. He literally, Marcos, things are not going well for you when you have to come in on Thursday from Argentina for a fight. And I also think that contributed, Marcos, what do you think of this? I think that contributed to the fact that Chavez held so much, because he was kind of marshaling his energy due to the fact that he felt that the ending, the latter part of that fight was going to be tough for him.
You can only imagine what was going on through him mentally, like at the beginning of that week, saying like, hey, your visa doesn't look like you're going to be able to make it to a fight. And he doesn't get a lot of big fights, so like he really, really needs this fight. He needs that check. Right. So you imagine being stressed out over that, and then at the last second, hey, you're going to fight again, take an overnight red-eye on Wednesday, land in the U.S. on Thursday, do his medicals, miss the press conference, and then go ahead and weigh in 20 hours later. Like, that's rough enough. And then what you mentioned, he knows he's coming. He already has his back against the wall. He already knows, like, he has to do something really big in the fight. And then for all that happen, I could totally see it that way. But, in the fight, though, he kept going away from what was working, which I found kind of odd. Because when he would box Rios, he was doing fine, and then he would go and hold and maul, and I
think that was a function. I agree with you, but I thought about it a lot later. I think that was a function of either his lack of energy because of what preceded, or his perception of what his energy level would be. But you're 100% right. When he could box and move, I really thought Chavez was the favorite in the fight going in, and had all that incident with the visa and the travel situation not happened, I personally think Chavez would have dominated the fight. Wow. Because in the spots where he was able to do what he wanted to do, he was. And let's talk about Brandon Rios for a second, Marcos. Let's talk about what this fight tells us about him. I have to be honest, I don't think it's a great report card for him because of what we just said. When Chavez was able to be Chavez in that fight, Brandon Rios was not able to really work effectively. And so I don't know if it's a significant upgrade despite the win of what Brandon Rios is capable of doing right now.
Well, at the end of the fight, when he was doing a post-fight interview, they asked him, hey, is Brandon Rios back? And he's like, no, not yet. I still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
So he's really honest.
A nice response.
Yeah, it's a really, and that's exactly what was said. Like, hey, that's a really honest response. Thank you for being so honest. But he said he was rusty, and you could tell. The Brandon Rios of maybe a year and a half ago, when he's working on the inside, would have worked a lot more active
Absolutely.
on the inside, and he seemed he just seemed off. Like he wasn't able to really work how we're usually used to seeing him work. And like you said, it wasn't a really good performance. Maybe it had to do with the time off he had personally. Because I know this is a long time since he fought Manny Pacquiao back last November. That could have affected him. Not having Alex Ariza in his camp, that could have been a factor as well. So, we don't really know. But overall, I would agree. There was a lot of things I felt that he usually does better. And maybe he just had an off night,
Yeah, well, it's been a series of them for him, which is certainly an issue. And he had injuries from that fight as well. We'll see how it goes, and I want to see Chavez back again. I thought Chavez fought very well against Keith Thurman, and again, and in spots in this fight did as well. Now, so and on that same night, and let's talk a little bit about the end around which is fascinating. That Main Events pulled, and the Golden Boy pulled. In making the Kovalev-Bernard Hopkins fight. Sergey Kovalev wins his fight, but we have a great interview on the Boxing Channel that Dave Bontempo did with Kathy Duva, who talked a little bit about how agonizing it was for her in that first round when Kovalev was knocked down. And she said of all the times for him to go down, it has to be in that round in this fight when, of course, he had waiting for him Bernard Hopkins. First, let's talk about where we think Kovalev is. Clearly, he's a punching machine, and he's got great power. But is he susceptible to Bernard Hopkins in terms of Hopkins' craftiness? And Hopkins, you would think to yourself, Bernard Hopkins wouldn't take a fight with this quote-unquote monster if there wasn't something in his brain that told him, I think I can beat this guy.
You know what? I think anybody and everybody is susceptible to Bernard Hopkins. That guy is so crafty. He seems to be just about everybody's kryptonite. But looking at Kovalev overall, to me, when I see him, and I've seen his fights over the past 2 years, that guy's solid. Like, he's a solid guy with skills. Like, he can. Yeah,
he is. I agree.
Little things like, he'll throw a jab and he'll take a little half step back, and it'll allow him to throw his straight. And it's just his amateur background and everything like that. I think a lot of people don't realize that or maybe look into it. This guy's a solid dude. He's like, he can box. He's to me, in my opinion, a bit more technical than Adonis Stevenson.
Yes.
So, when people are matching him up, I think this is a really tough test for both guys. And obviously, Bernard has a history of upsetting people and really taking people out of their rhythm. With the jab and then the clinching and just doing all sorts of things. But to me, it's still, Kovalev's youth and just his punching power. The guy can punch and can kill you with a punch, and he can box. That's the thing. Yeah. And he can box. Usually the guy can just knock you out with a punch, and then that's all he's relying on. But this guy is very, very solid. So I want to see how that facet of his game can play out against Bernard Hopkins, because if you look at the Russian amateur program, those guys are solid as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The whole scenario here is fascinating because Bernard Hopkins and Stevenson, which was pretty much considered to be almost a done deal, represented a fight that looked perfect for Hopkins because Stevenson, in his fight with Fanfara, the fight before that, got tired, was hurt badly later in the fight. Amazingly was able to come back and still win the fight. He was ahead on the scorecards, but then was, as I said, was tired and badly hurt. It looked for all the world like the perfect situation for Bernard Hopkins to use all the guile that you talked about and all the craftiness. And yet, as he said in the interview that was done after the fight, he said, I don't run away from the fire, I run to the fire. And in this case, he did run to what we think is the fire with Kovalev. And so it sets up, I think, a really fascinating scenario. And, of course, these days in the business of boxing, we keep score as much about what happens outside the ring with promoters and networks and managers and all the rest of it as we do what happens inside the ring. And the other part about this that was clearly a big, a fascinating development was that after looking like this fight was made with Stevenson, Golden Boy approached Kathy Duva, and they made, with Main Events, they made the fight, and it moved over across the street to HBO, which was another interesting development. And so, and then we throw into all this, Marcos, the fact that now we have these kinds of dynamics happening, and all the while, Mayweather Promotions has now gotten a license to promote boxing in the state of Nevada. So we may be headed toward not a two-sided Cold War, but a pyramid Cold War. Is that possible with three different sides? How does that work?
That's funny. I brought that up. That same point you just made, I brought that up to somebody, and I told him, watch. You see how Oscar left Arum, and then they butted heads. And then Floyd left Arum, and him and Oscar were like, oh, yeah, we'll do business together.
Exactly.
Mayweather is not going to want to do business with Golden Boy like 3 years from now, and they're going to butt heads, and they're not going to want to do fights. So it's just, it's a soap opera. But
it really is. It really is, and that's the way it ends up being. I always say that boxing, other sports like baseball, football, basketball, if they didn't have a league structure, we can think, can't we, all of us, of 5 or 6 rogue owners in every one of those leagues who would be acting exactly the same, right? What do you think, Dan? The same as these promoters are if they weren't ruled with an iron fist by the leagues.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the future. The Cold War is over. Now anybody can go anywhere. It looks like it's a free market economy that's opened up now for boxing, and I think it's exciting myself. And
you love the chaos, huh?
I do. I love every bit of it. Every bit of it is great.
That's funny. Well, it's going to be fascinating, and it is going to create all these interesting stories. All right, in the midst of all this, we're boxing, which had a great year in 2013. We had a slow start, then it picked up the pace in these middle months, and heading down the stretch, there are a lot of fights that look interesting, but this weekend's card on Showtime that I'll be broadcasting has taken some heat because Danny Garcia taking on Rob Salka. It was originally a title match. Then they did not sanction it as a title match. And Salka is clearly a big underdog in this fight. And also Lamont Peterson taking on Edwin Santana. Santana also a huge underdog in the fight. And both Peterson and Garcia are title holders. And this presumably is a fight that will set up those two fighting each other. I guess the beef that boxing fans have, or some writing about boxing have, is why do we need the setup fight when in reality Peterson and Garcia could just fight? And I think that's probably the main reason why this card is taking so much heat.
No, I agree, but I always bring up this point in terms of this card with Danny, and I always tell people, you know what, I agree with you. This guy's not ranked. He should have rematched Herrera, because he's clearly, a lot of people felt that Herrera beat him in Puerto Rico.
I did.
But you're not the only one now. But, I always bring up the point, you know what, for the last 2 years, Danny's had one of the toughest schedules in boxing in terms of opponents. And I'm like, you know what, I could see him, not really side, but I could see the thinking like, hey, man, like, give me a break. Like, these 2 years I've been fighting these monsters. But to counteract that, I think that's why people are angry, because we've known Danny Garcia to take on those guys, and he's beaten them. And especially if you're the unified champion at 140 pounds, undisputed, you shouldn't be fighting a guy that's ranked number 70. You should be fighting top 5 guys.
Well, and I think part of the thing, and I think part of it is, this is where the landscape of boxing has changed. In the old days, 25, 30 years ago, Danny Garcia could have fought a non-title fight against somebody, which they often did, but those fights were maybe not on the main TV network, so they were off. Now, I don't think anyone's begrudging him fighting him. I guess the people are distressed because first of all, they wanted to make it a title match, and then secondly, it's on a major network. Here's the other thing, though, and I always say this: people are giving this fight card a really hard time and writing it off before it's even happened. And I can think of 3 or 4 fights already this year: Algieri, Pacquiao, Matisse and Molina, and Herrera Garcia, and there was one more I was thinking about that. It does not tip my tongue, but where people thought, oh, gee, it's a walkover, and it wasn't a walkover. So you have to at least give a fight a chance, before you throw dirt on it.
Danny said a great point in an interview. He said, at the end of the day, it's two guys fighting in the ring. You don't think we're going to want to fight and put on a good show? Mm-hmm. Which is true. Salka's going to come and he's going to want to bring it.
He's not a big fighter.
He's not going to want to just go and get run over. Like, why is he fighting then? Like, if I was in his position, I'd be like, heck no, this is the one chance I have to make myself look good. I'm going to give this guy hell.
Yeah, and also Danny Jacobs fighting, and he isn't exactly as tough as people would like. But again, his fight could be going. So inevitably, what ends up happening, and I always say this, I guarantee you, I almost guarantee you, or as close as I can come to a guarantee, one of those three fights will be good.
Yeah.
Because it always happens that way, right? We don't know which one. We're not exactly sure why one of them's going to be good. One of them's going to be a good fight, and then for that one anyway, people are going to be forced to say, oh, okay, well, maybe it was all right. Let's fast forward to Shawn Porter, of course, who was going to be with us this evening.
Now, let me say just one thing. Peterson, it's important to know, Peterson, his last 3 wins have been stoppage wins. So
yes.
If that's something to say to the fans, like, hey, this guy's been stopping people, tune in because he has a lot of momentum coming in. Yeah.
Right, exactly. He beat...
was it Michael Clark?
Michael Clark, Thierry, in the last fight. So, yeah, no, and listen, I think, of course, I'm doing the broadcast, and I want people to watch, and I do think, I'm saying it because it's a fact, one of them's going to be good. And also the other thing is, part of the vitriol, when I see it all over Twitter and whatever, is, at the end of the day, we've had all these huge string of really, really good fights. And I just think people get go so far overboard in, like I say, in pouring dirt over a match before it's even happened. You got to give it at least a little chance. But we'll see what happens. Now, on August 16th, we'll be back at the StubHub Center in Southern California for what I think is really going to be an interesting card. Let's talk first about the Anthony Durrell and Sakio Bika, which is a 168-pound title match that I think is going to be really the first one was a great match and ended up being a draw, and Bika kept his title. Very close fight. I think this one will be just as exciting as the last one.
That first one, I personally felt that Durrell had won.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
Yeah, Bika's a rough customer, man. Like, with all his fights, he comes and he roughs you up and he tries to maul you and he fights on the inside. If you were to present me to him, like, hey, you're gonna fight Bika, I'd be like, man, like, okay, I'm really gonna have to earn my money that night. It's a hard fight. But obviously Durrell is the more naturally talented fighter. Yeah. So you got to give him the advantage coming into the fight, especially in the rematch. Rematches are never the same as the first fight. Both guys always look at what they did right, what they did wrong, and they work on it from there. But I think somebody with just the amount of talent that he has, it'll be a different fight. I don't think Bika will give him as much trouble as he did in the first fight.
Yeah, and Sakio Bika's, as you said, very rough customer. I remember back when he fought Andre Ward in the middle of the Super 6 tournament. It wasn't part of the tournament. He gave Ward the toughest fight maybe of Ward's career over people like Kyle Froch and others. So he is a very tough guy.
That fight is what showed me that Andre Ward had the potential to be a great fighter because he flipped on Bika, and he was doing the same thing in him. He adjusted it and started fighting him that way, and I was like, oh, wow, like he got some serious skills.
That's a very good point. It really was a sign of that. And also, Andre Ward was forced to be rough and tough on the inside. Bika's technique has, while it was never perfect, has gone south even more, though, in the last several fights. And I think that's a big issue. And you would have to look at Durrell as the favorite in this fight. But because of who Bika is and the way he performs and the power he has in that overhand right, it's going to be an interesting fight. Shawn
I
Porter,
just hope that it doesn't get stopped or anything like this last fight last weekend, or there's not or like points or anything like that.
Yeah, one would hope not. Now the Shawn Porter is going to be taking on Kell Brook on August 16th, and what interests me about this fight, there are a couple of things. Number one, Kell Brook has come very close to getting one of these opportunities to fight in America in a big fight before. A series of on-again, off-again fights with Evan Alexander. Porter ends up beating Alexander for his crown and defending against Paulie Malignaggi. And now here we are with Kell Brook finally getting over to the States to challenge for a world title. Now, I have long been of the opinion that Kell Brook is a better fighter than a lot of people give him credit for. I'm not suggesting he's the second coming of Sugar Ray Robinson, but he's a very solid fighter. And he's very motivated. And I think when I talked to Shawn at this last fight, he said that. He said, look, this guy he has a set of skills that you can't discount. That he's a very, very solid fighter. Now, having said that, he's one of those people that does everything pretty well and nothing great. But when you put the sum of the parts together, it equals a fighter. Is there a danger in your mind that a Shawn Porter can look past somebody like Kell Brook, or is this young man motivated to the point where this is early in his championship reign? He's not going to be looking ahead.
You know what? I don't think he will be looking ahead. Just given the circumstances, Kell Brook's been wanting something like this for such a long time, and he already has had 32 fights, and he's just so desperate for this chance to show people that he's the real deal. That he goes by, isn't his nickname
Special K?
Yeah, Special K. That he has the goods. And all that, that motivation coming in makes him a lot more dangerous than as if he were.
I agree.
If he were fighting somebody else in England and given the ramifications of the fight. But Shawn has a lot of momentum, and if you were to match them side by side on paper, like who has more strength, speed, skills, and stuff, you could grow a big list that all those go to Shawn.
Right. Yeah, Shawn Porter will be the favorite in this fight, and for those reasons that you talked about. And the other thing about Shawn Porter is, Gil Clancy, the great trainer and broadcaster who was one of my mentors, always said that he felt that when a fighter becomes a world champion, he gets about 20% better from the experience and from the confidence. And boy, Shawn Porter is the poster guy for that, because clearly, we saw it in his performance against Paulie Malignaggi. And we saw it in the championship match against Evan Alexander, too. You're right. He is on a roll, and he has significantly upped his game. Shawn was always thought of as somebody with a lot of potential and strength, but sometimes gave uneven efforts in the ring. But like in his fights with Diaz, in which one of them was a draw, and it was difficult for people to see that he had come into his full potential. But he and his dad have worked very hard to turn him into a much better fighter. I want to talk about for a second. It brings me actually to a topic that I've been meaning to. I'm happy to have a chance to talk to you about, because you, like I, appreciate Keith Thurman and what he does in the ring. And it feels to me like Keith Thurman is the elephant in the room for the welterweights. Is that kind of your perception of him as well?
Yeah, it is. He's the big, what if?
Yeah.
In a sense, but I don't want to see him fight yet. I don't want to see Porter fight Thurman yet, because I want them to build them up to a point where, both these guys are undefeated. Both these guys are at the top of the welterweight class. Something like a Chaves Taylor, when both guys are wow, Taylor is this legit fighter. He's been box your pants off. He's undefeated. Chavez is this guy with this unbelievable win streak that no one's beating him. No one's got in trouble. I want something like that to be built up with these two guys. I don't want it right away yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. The problem for Keith Thurman, though, is he is certainly deserving of a big fight, or at the very least, if not a title fight. And the problem is he just can't get anybody to get in the ring with him.
Look what he's been doing to people.
Yeah, and so that's
fighting Keith Thurman in a business sense is high risk, low reward.
Yeah, it really is, and that we were talking about boxing as a sport. That's again where you can't. There's no schedule made, so you can't force people, but at some point someone's got to fight him. And I believe that if there's a welterweight out there, of course, Marcos Maidana, who's going to be facing Floyd Mayweather again, gave Mayweather all he can handle in a very, very close fight. And many believe Maidana could still give him a good fight the next time. But if Floyd Mayweather stays undefeated in this run of all these fights, I'm wondering, is he going to be able to sidestep Keith Thurman himself? Will Thurman get enough cachet by the time we get to the sixth fight in the deal for Mayweather to be called upon, if you will, to fight Keith Thurman? Because I happen to believe that the most dangerous opponent for Floyd Mayweather among the welterweights is Keith Thurman. Do you think that's a fair statement, Marcos, or am I an idiot?
No,
or even just a small part of an idiot.
No, you know, he's good overall. Has very, very scary power. I don't know how you would compare his power with Canelo. You know, because
Canelo's a higher weight.
Yeah, you know, higher weight and all that, but. I think for Thurman to be positioned into a fight like that, even though I don't want to see it, because like I mentioned, I want it to be built up. I want it to be this big thing, you know. But I think for that to gain track, he's gonna have to fight Shawn, and whoever wins.
Sure. Or somebody, I don't even know. Right, I don't know who else he could fight. I could fight Robert Guerrero, although they've been trying to make that match. And this is a case where the fact that the different promotional bodies don't, you know, mix and match. Interesting possibility, though, when you think about it, that since Golden Boy and Bob Arum, Top Rank, seem like they're willing to do business, this might be the prime case where one of those welterweights on the Arum side of the aisle, whether it's a Tim Bradley or even a Provodnikov who can move up to 147, or anybody.
Imagine Provodnikov and Thurman. Oh my!
That'd be wild. Maybe they could make a match like that.
Yeah, very true. Go ahead, Dan.
Gentlemen, we have for a moment, and we've just had a terrible connection, but I'm going to try to bring him into the broadcast here. Shawn, can you hear us? I'm trying one more time.
We're endeavoring to get Shawn Porter, who, of course, was going to join us at the beginning of this call, but we had some technical issues and couldn't do it.
We've got him in the dark in the booth, and it's just not working. But boy, we're still.
Hopefully we'll get it worked out where we get the right people in place next time. We'll try and work it out over the next couple of days. We're about to close up shop here in any case. Marcos, before I let you go, you have I want to say this about you and get your thoughts. You have, in my opinion, become one of the best correspondents and reporters working in boxing in the last several years. You've just gotten better and better and better. Tell me, from the perspective of a young journalist making his way in boxing and through that toward the television, how do you describe your development in this, and what parts of it have been fun and exciting to you?
You know, I think the fun part is that boxing's like a sideshow. You know, exactly. It's a circus. Like you meet the craziest people. Like you think, like, how the heck is this guy involved with this guy, or like how in the hell does this guy have a job? And then it's just like like the wackiest personalities. And I to me that's the funnest part, is that you meet all these wacky people. And a lot of the time, though, they're really, really nice. And when you like sit with somebody like Bob Arum, or somebody who's had a long track record in boxing, and you ask him to tell you a story, like, oh, you know, tell me about so and so this fight. And to me, that's when it makes me go like, wow, like I'm so happy and so glad that I had a chance to talk to this person about that, because they're giving you like a first-hand account of history, something that, you know. They're telling me, like, for instance, I asked Arum about the Thriller in Manila. I wasn't even born yet when that fight happened. And he was telling me about how his experience was the day after the fight, how he came out and then the sun hit him in the eyes, and he felt that Ali was truly touched by God, a person that was touched by God. So in that aspect, to me, it will be the most memorable and really the most rewarding. Speaking with the athletes too, I've yet to find an athlete that's not like they all seem in boxing, especially, very nice, genuine people. Like they're just good people.
That's great. That's a good point. And we're going to wind this down here, and we're going to endeavor very much to get Shawn on here in the next day or so. But because we didn't quite work this out tonight. But that's a great note to close on. I've been covering boxing for over 30 years and have been talking to boxers, many boxers, for that whole time. And I'll tell you what, people don't realize that they're the greatest athletes to cover, aren't they?
No, they are. They are, and they're genuine. Like when you see like how they just interact with fans, like especially like Mayweather. Mayweather gets a lot of flack from a lot of people, but he's one of the few guys that I've actually seen him after a press conference stay for 2 hours to sign people's autographs.
Mm-hmm.
And after press
intriguing.
And those little things like makes you wonder like, oh wow, like this guy's a really good dude, and look, he really cares about his fans. And that's with a lot of like athletes, like boxers and everything like that. They're very nice people. They're some of the most honest people in the world, and sometimes they get taken advantage of because they're so honest. They're such good people, and it's sad to see when that happens. But just overall, I've never met anybody who's been a bad person. Like they're all really nice.
Yeah, for the most part, I agree with you, and I'm proud of your work on the boxing channel. You've done a great job, and I'm happy that you could join us here on the Hangout.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate the kind words, and I'm happy to grind for you guys. Like I said, I never thought I'd be doing something like this, and it's just when I think about it, it's like, wow, man, how'd I end up over here doing this? Because I went to school for advertising, I wanted to make crazy advertisements and stuff, and I'm here doing broadcasting. So, what a ride so far.
You've done very well, and you deserve success at it. And thanks for joining us. And Dan, we're gonna. I think we mentioned, and the people probably saw we were close to getting Shawn hooked up for this, but it didn't quite work out. But we're gonna work on it over the next day or two, and see if we can rehook this up, huh?
Yes, sir. We're going to get this rescheduled right away. And as a matter of fact, I want everybody to know, just so that we have everything square, Shawn Porter has, in this entire broadcast, been attempting to rejoin, rejoin. So this, on his part, I want to say thank you for, you want to talk about somebody who doesn't quit. There's Shawn Porter. He kept coming in over and over again, and we just couldn't get it to work on this computer. We had another one which will work better on, and we're going to try and get it rescheduled right away.
Yeah, and that, which, by the way, pretty much describes Shawn Porter's approach in the ring, doesn't it?
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
He never gives up, and he's a great guy. So when for those folks, when you get a chance to hear him in a long-form interview like this, which is what we were so anxious to have, you're going to get a real sense of who Shawn is and what an interesting and articulate guy he is, and we'll endeavor that. Now, I should mention also, we have a hangout coming up I'm very excited about, and it's August 12th, I believe?
August 12th, yes.
And it is going to be with Pat Miletich. Of course, Dan covers and knows the MMA world very well. I have dabbled in it myself, and I certainly enjoy mixed martial arts. And I was privileged to work with Pat Miletich on a Strikeforce broadcast, so that was a lot of fun. And Pat Miletich, the legend in the world of mixed martial arts, is going to be with us on August 12th, and I cannot wait for that. That's going to be so much fun.
That is another one that is high on my list, and he is also a new Hall of Famer. I think, right? UFC Hall of Famer, Pat Miletich. And I'm thrilled about this one, too. I've actually had the opportunity to train with Pat, and and I have a couple of great stories. I have nothing but huge admiration and respect for him. He is a really amazing legend.
Yeah, Pat's a great guy, and one of the people you would love to sit and have dinner with. And listen, Pat likes me so much, he doesn't even care that I'm a liberal. That's how nice it is. He said, look, I know you're a liberal, but I like you anyway. Pat's a little bit farther to the right politically than I am, so we have some good conversations. But he is a wonderful guy. And I'll tell you what, fans are going to be really interested in hearing from him. And by the way, he's a huge boxing fan as well. Like so many of the the MMA champions are and the people that understand both sports. All right, we're going to endeavor to get Shawn Porter around the next couple of days. We're going to keep you all posted on Twitter and on Facebook. And my thanks to Dan, as always. Thanks to Marcos Villegas for joining us and hanging in there. And thanks to Shawn Porter for making the effort, and we'll get it done. So thank you all. We'll see you next time on the Hangouts.